Hi everyone, this is meteorologist Joel Curtis with your Alaska Weather TV show. Only one warning for the state as today, flood warning for the Anchor River due to an ice jam. The current ice jam is just downstream from the old Seward Highway. Water is 6 inches from going over the road, and the reading at 1 p.m. was 19 feet on the river gauge. Looking at our breakup map, we've only got some open water south of Nenana and also southeast of Fairbanks. Otherwise, nothing going on really with the breakup today. But we do need your spotter reports, and we do need your pictures and videos. So here's how you submit the reports. You can use the email that's on the screen there, or you can dial 1-800-847-1739 and either leave a message or you might talk to a river forecaster. So looking at our satellite loop today, we see an old low pressure system south of Sand Point and a occluded front wrapped around that system. And as we can see, the clouds move up into Bristol Bay and Kodiak Island, and that low continues to spin around south of Sand Point. So for today's weather, we've got lots of surface high pressure over the northern half of the state, 1034 millibars over just north of the Brooks Range, and also into the Yukon Territory, also for far eastern Russia. And there's our old friend, a 985 millibar low south of Sand Point, and what we call an occluded front wrapped around that system with an onshore flow for Kodiak Island and the northern Alaska Peninsula and much of the Alaska Peninsula. Lots of vertical motion setting off showers or rain for most of the Alaska Peninsula and also the Aleutians. Also, there's just a little bit of light rain touching the Hyder area for today. For tonight, that low has weakened to 991 millibars south of Coal Bay. A secondary low has formed to 1010 millibars in the Gulf of Alaska, just southeast of Kodiak Island. And there's some warm air out ahead of that with the Gulf, causing a little light rain moving up to Kodiak Island, but also in the higher terrain, there's still a little bit of light snow forming as all of those winds hit that higher terrain. Also, we have a few snow showers out over the Alaska Peninsula and into the eastern Aleutians, as well as rain showers. And then as we go far to the west, we can see another system that's just barely brushing well south of the Shemya area. And then for Thursday's weather, high pressure system just southeast of Banks Island, 1030 millibars. Also for far eastern Russia, 1023 millibars just west of the Gulf of Anadyr. Also, we have the old low, now still south of Sand Point, 995 millibars, and that is causing a little bit of light onshore flow in the eastern Gulf, or the western Gulf region. Some precipitation hitting the Kenai Peninsula. Higher terrain is still a little light snow. Also, the higher terrain on the west side of Cook Inlet, a little mixed precipitation. The precipitation spreads into the Bristol Bay area across Nunivak Island. A few light snow showers or mixed rain and snow near the St. Matthew area. And then a weak trough moving across the Bering Sea and that will move out of the area as we get to Friday. Also, still some precipitation occurring out over the Gulf in the form of light rain, but most of the state is really nice and clear. Then as we get to Friday's weather, that trough has now extended well into the western Bering Sea, with a secondary trough still moving around in the St. Matthew area. A little mixed precipitation as you get farther north, but mostly rain showers over the Bering Sea. A few light snow showers over the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. The low has now weakened to 989 millibars south of Adak, but it's joined up with a secondary low. And then there's just an ever so slight light onshore for Kodiak Island and the western side of Shelikof Strait. As you get over the higher terrain, you could see a snow shower or two, but a few light showers in southwestern Alaska. And then a weak low, 1,006 millibars over in the Gulf of Alaska, and precipitation in the form of light rain barely touching southeast Alaska. So our low temperatures starting out for Thursday morning in the lower 30s to mid 30s for southeast Alaska, 25 for Yakutat, 22 for Gulkana, 27 for Talkeetna, and then as we get further down in south central, around 32 to 29 or so for the Kenai Peninsula, 38 for Homer, and 41 for Kodiak Island. Then for our high temperatures Thursday afternoon, temperatures well into the 50s for southeast Alaska, except for 53 at Yakutat, 55 for Gulkana, 54 for Valdez. And then as we get over to south central, generally the upper 40s to lower 50s in lower south central, but 61 at at Talkeetna, and then 45 down at Kodiak Island. Then for our low temperatures Friday morning, temperatures in the lower 30s to mid 30s for southeast Alaska, and up to 40 degrees for Sitka, 29 for Yakutat, 24 for Gulkana, 27 for Talkeetna, 32 for Anchorage, 27 for Kenai, and then mid 30s as you go down into the western Gulf of Alaska region. And then for our high temperatures for Friday afternoon, temperatures well into the 50s, 60 for Klawock and Craig area, and 57 for Ketchikan, 55 for Yakutat, 56 for Gulkana, 62 for Talkeetna, and then in the mid-50s for much more of south central, down to 47, and still clouds and a little light precipitation for Kodiak Island. And then low temperatures Thursday morning along the north slopes, single digits up into the teens. And then as you get a little bit further south, you can start seeing those lower 20s, 24 for Fairbanks, 27 for Nome, 15 for Kotzebue, and then 27 down in the Yukon Delta. Then for Thursday afternoon, we can see temperatures in the 20s all along the north slope. We also have temperatures into the 50s and lower 60s. Look for that 60 at Fairbanks. 38 for Kotzebue, 48 for Nome, and then 60 for McGrath. And then for Friday morning, temperatures again almost touching the single digits for the north slope, but into the teens as you get south of the Brooks Range, and then rising up into the 20s and lower 30s as you get down and further into the central interior, and then 29 for Nome. And then for our high temperatures Friday afternoon, well into the lower 30s for most of the north slope, 35 for Point Hope, and then 51 as you get down to Fort Yukon, 60 for Fairbanks, 59 for McGrath, and then 42 for Nome. And then looking at the southwest, we've got still some temperatures, a lot of lows are in the 30s, and then going out to 40s as you go out the Alaska Peninsula, and then again mid-30s as you go out the Aleutian Chain, 34 for the Pribilofs. And then 39 for the Pribilofs for Thursday afternoon, temperatures into the 40s for southwestern Alaska, including the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. And then for Friday morning, we've got temperatures in the 30s, mid-30s for southwestern Alaska, also for in the mid-30s as you go out the Alaska Peninsula, 34 for the Pribilofs. And then temperatures almost touching 50, 54 for king salmon, and then temperatures mostly in the 40s, 39 for the Pribilofs. So our 6 to 10 day forecast for the 27th to the 1st has below normal temperatures for southeast Alaska and the southeastern part of the mainland, but above normal temperatures along the west coast, and precipitation below normal for most of the state, normal for the panhandle. And then as we look for our Climate Prediction Center for 8 to 14 day, from the 29th through the 5th, it's showing a temperature probability above normal for southwestern Alaska, and then all the way up into the state, normal along the Alcan, and then down into southeast Alaska, and then precipitation probability for below normal for much of the state, and normal for the most of southeast Alaska as we get into the over to the 5th. So as we get longer out, it's looking a little bit more dry and above normal temperatures. So be safe out there. Heed that flood warning down there at the Anchor River, and we'll be studying for breakup real soon here. Be safe out there.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hi everyone, and now for your aviation weather. Starting out with the flying weather Thursday morning, we've got some pretty good flight conditions going on for most of the state. However, we still have some IFR that's moved into southwestern Alaska, including Nunivak Island. Also a little more marginal VFR with some IFR that's moved in north of Dillingham. Also the outer coast of Kodiak Island, as well as a part of Chillicothe Strait. And then down through the Alaska Peninsula, out to the Pribilofs, and most of the Aleutians for IFR conditions. For Thursday afternoon, that IFR still is persistent along the southwest coast, including Cape Newenham and Nunivak Island, as well as the Pribilofs and most of the Aleutians. But notice that the IFR is now working on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula and also the outer coast of Kodiak Island, still a little bit in through Kennedy Entrance. For Friday morning, not a whole lot of change. Some IFR has moved into the inland part of Bristol Bay area, including north of Dillingham. Also Nunivak Island, the Pribilofs, most of the Aleutians, and again, the Gulf and Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, and all of Kodiak Island. For Friday afternoon, things improve quite a bit, with the IFR staying offshore from Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, but still into the Aleutians, Nunivak Island, and the Pribilofs. For our past conditions on Thursday, Anaktuvik VFR, Adigan VFR, Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR becoming VFR. Rainy Pass, marginal VFR becoming VFR. Windy Pass, VFR. Isabel Pass, VFR. Mentasta Pass, VFR. Tanita Pass, VFR. Portage Pass, marginal VFR in the morning, becoming VFR. Chilkoot and White Pass, VFR. Our freezing levels are very complex this morning, but there's a surface freezing level for most, let's say, the upper 2/3 of the state. There's still some warm air all the way up to 6,000 foot freezing level for the Bering Strait area, including parts of the North Slope, and then quite a bit of warm air over the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. Also, some warm air has moved into the Gulf of Alaska, but 4,000 feet would be the freezing level as you get close to shore. For icing on Thursday, all isolated moderate conditions above 6,000 feet for the Alaskan Peninsula, southwest Alaska, Kodiak Island, and the eastern Aleutians, above 4,000 feet south of the western Aleutians, and above 4,000 feet along the Alcan border in the northeastern portion of the state. For a jet stream on Thursday, we've got a west-northwest jet that's shaped up south of Adak, about 125 knots. But then there's a southeasterly branch that starts out at about Kodiak Island, 95 knots, over Bristol Bay, and on up across Nunivak Island and up to St. Matthew and St. Lawrence Island. Also, we have northerlies over the Alcan, about anywhere from about 80 to 95 knots or so, and 80 knots as you get down toward the Panhandle, again northerlies. For our 9,000 foot winds, we have an upper level high over the Point Hope area, causing northerlies 25 knots along the north slope and 40 knots as you get over into Canada. But the main circulation is around that low south of Coal Bay and circulating around about 30 to 35 knots in the circulation and 40 knots out in the Gulf. For our 3,000 foot winds on Thursday, not a whole lot going on with 40 knots out over the Gulf, 40 knots easterlies over Kennedy Entrance, and then that circulation around that low, about 30 to 30, maybe up to 40 knots or so, with the upper level high over the northern interior. And that causes our turbulence to be some isolated moderate in the eastern side of Norton Sound, below 4,000 feet. We do have an area of considerable moderate through Kennedy Entrance, most of Kodiak Island, lots of the Alaska Peninsula, on down to Dutch Harbor. On the Bering Sea side, expect some low-level wind shear, but most of that whole area will be below 4,000 feet for that moderate turbulence. So fly safe out there and take good care. File a flight plan.
What we're looking at is a legacy of the Ice Age. Permafrost and methane is a time machine. So what we're going to do is walk back in time. We're going to see old carbon, old bones, old environments, and none of those are in equilibrium with today's climate, so that's the problem. That world doesn't exist anymore, and it hasn't for 10,000 years. It was nicely and very delicately separated from this modern warmer climate by about this much moss. And when that moss goes away, whether for fire or for human disturbance or for warming, then all hell breaks loose.
Permafrost. It's maybe the part of the cryosphere that's most out of sight and mind. It's fascinating how it formed in the first place and how it got loaded with so much carbon. In a minute, we'll go back underground with Matthew Sturm from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. But first, let's meet Peter Griffith, NASA's project manager for the Above campaign, which supports more than 70 science projects studying forest and tundra vegetation, wildfires, animals like birds, caribou, and Dall sheep, methane emissions from expanding northern lakes, and the impacts of climate change on people in Alaska, Canada, and around the world. Many of those projects have some direct connection to permafrost.
Permafrost is the hidden cryosphere. It's the permanently frozen soil that surrounds the Arctic, all across Alaska, northern Canada, and then across Eurasia. The ground has been frozen during the ice ages.
During the ice ages, there was not enough snowfall in the drier regions of Alaska and Canada to form glaciers there, so the land was suitable for vegetation.
What happened is that over thousands and thousands of years, all of that plant material got compacted and frozen every winter and buried and pushed down, so that today there's 300 feet deep of frozen water and dead plants and some pieces of dead animals too. Sometimes you find woolly mammoths in the permafrost. But most of it, of the organic matter as we call it in the permafrost, is frozen plant material.
Some of that plant material is now thawing and decaying, releasing its ancient carbon into the atmosphere, sometimes in the form of methane gas bubbling out of expanding northern lakes.
We started this field campaign because the Arctic is the part of the planet that is warming first and fastest. And there are consequences to this for permafrost. So during the Arctic Boreal Vulnerability Experiment, we're studying permafrost with people on the ground, from aircraft flying over the region, and also from satellites in space.
Another way to understand the permafrost is to take a walk below ground with Matthew Sturm and into the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permafrost tunnel.
And they've dug this tunnel back into the side of a hill about 200 feet, and it goes sort of sloping down so that by the end of the tunnel you're about 100 feet underground, and you're surrounded by bones sticking out of the wall from the steppe bison and the mastodons that are frozen in it. There's sticks that are 40,000 years old, that you can touch with your hand. There's grass that's still green, that's tens of thousands of years old because it got frozen, right away, and it's never lost the green color.
But as fascinating as it is to see these relics of an ancient era, or to see a tree split in half by thawing soil, or even to light a ball of methane on fire from under winter ice, at the end of the day, Peter and his colleagues want to know just how much organic matter is frozen in that permafrost, and how fast it might be released.
Currently, we think that there is something on the order of 2 to 3 times as much carbon locked up as frozen organic matter in permafrost as there is carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So releasing all of that organic carbon from permafrost into the atmosphere would be a real game changer. That would be a tremendous transformation of the planet's atmosphere. Now, the good news is that it would take a very, very long time for that to happen. However, we are warming the planet at a rate now that calls into question how quickly is that changing and what the consequences in the near future and in the far future are going to be.
You're in the middle of a field somewhere in California at 4 in the morning. It's sort of surreal in a way because you've put so much time into it for so long, and actually seeing it over there is like, whoa, it's a big deal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And now for your marine forecast. Starting out with today's sea ice edge, the ice edge continues to surge toward the southwest due to persistent northwest winds. And yesterday it was moving about 10 nautical miles per day, and that's probably what it's probably moving right now. Looking at Thursday's marine forecast for southeast Alaska waters. On the inside, northerlies 10 to 20 knots, seas up to 4 feet. And on the outside waters, generally offshore flow, most have an easterly component, 10 to 15 knots, seas up to 9 feet on the outside. And then on the inside waters, 10 all the way up to 25 knots, seas 5 feet for Lynn Canal, up to 3 feet elsewhere. And then on the outside waters, all have an easterly or northerly component, ranging 10 to 20 knots and seas up to 7 feet. For south central waters, easterly winds 15 all the way up to gale force 35 knots, seas 13 feet on the outside, northerlies 10 knots, seas 2 feet in Prince William Sound, and northeasterlies generally in Cook Inlet 20 all the way up to 30 knots, and seas 8 feet in the southern part of the Cook Inlet. And then for Friday's marine forecast, on the outside, northeasterlies 10 to 20 knots, seas up to 8 feet on the outside, northeasterlies 10 knots, seas 2 feet for Prince William Sound, and northerlies in Cook Inlet 10 to 15 knots and seas up to 3 feet down by Augustine. For the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island on Thursday, on the Pacific side, 20 to 30 knots, seas up to 14 feet, and then on the Bering Sea side, easterlies 20 to 30 knots, seas up to 8 feet off of Coal Bay. And then for the peninsula and Kodiak Island on Friday, easterlies 10 to 20 knots, seas up to 7 feet, and then on the Bering Sea side, 10 to 15 knots, seas up to 3 feet. For the Aleutian Chain, a variable mixed bag of wind directions circulating around that low that's south of Sand Point. And we've got 15 to 25 knots on the Bering Sea side, seas as high as 10 feet, but that's off of Dutch Harbor. And then on the Pacific side, we have 20 to 25 knots and seas up to 14 feet, again, south of Dutch Harbor. Then on Friday's marine forecast, we have easterlies in the eastern section, generally 20 knots on the Bering Sea side and 20 to 25 knots on the Pacific side. And then as you get further out in the Aleutians, northerlies, 15 to 20 knots, seas up to 6 feet there. For the west coast, generally northeast wind, 15 to 25 knots, seas up to 10 feet in the Pribilofs, up to 6 feet south of St. Matthew Island. And then for Friday's forecast for the west coast, generally easterlies, 10 to 15 knots, seas up to 5 feet in the Pribilofs, and 4 feet south of St. Matthew Island. And for the Arctic coast, generally westerlies, 10 to 5 knots, seas over ice. And then for the Bering Strait end, we have 10 to 15 knots. And then for Friday's marine forecast for the Arctic coast, generally southerlies, 5 to 15 knots. And then as you get around to the Point Lay area, it's got an easterly component of the wind, 10 to 15 knots. So a recap of tonight's weather. New low south of Sand Point, 991 millibars. It's really weakening fast. A secondary low, 1,010 millibars, and that's southeast of Kodiak Island. Onshore flow bringing precipitation to the Kodiak Island, Bering Sea. Also, we have onshore flow for the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. And then for Thursday's weather, generally clear skies over most of Alaska, but still onshore flow for the southern Kenai Peninsula and into Bristol Bay and all through the Bering Sea. And thanks for tuning in.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.